In the summer of 1518, the city of Strasbourg, then part of the Holy Roman Empire, became the stage for one of the most inexplicable events in human history. What began as the erratic movements of a single woman quickly escalated into a full-blown epidemic of uncontrollable dancing, affecting hundreds of citizens. Unlike modern dance crazes, this phenomenon was involuntary, relentless, and deadly. People danced for days on end, unable to stop, collapsing from sheer exhaustion, dehydration, and heart failure. No music accompanied their movements, no festival or ritual prompted them. There was no apparent cause, no pathogen, no toxin, no known psychological trigger at the time. And yet, for weeks, the streets of Strasbourg were filled with the feverish, frantic movements of ordinary men and women, consumed by a compulsion they could neither understand nor resist. Eyewitness accounts describe streets choked with bodies writhing, screaming, and collapsing in fatigue, while terrified onlookers were helpless to intervene. The dancing plague of 1518 is a striking example of mass psychogenic illness and one of history's most perplexing and tragic mass behavioral phenomena. The outbreak began in July 1518 with a woman known as Frau Trophäa, sometimes recorded as Frederica, who stepped into the streets of Strasbourg and began dancing uncontrollably. Observers initially assumed she was suffering from fever, stress, or intoxication. However, it quickly became clear that her movements were involuntary, trance-like, and persistent. She could not stop, even as her body fatigued and her muscles ached. Within days, other citizens began joining her. Historian John Waller notes that by the end of the first week, dozens of people were dancing. And by the second week, estimates suggest that over 400 residents had been affected. Some accounts claim that people danced from morning until night, falling only briefly to rest before resuming. Eyewitnesses described a terrifying scene: screaming, sweating, collapsing dancers, and frantic townsfolk attempting in vain to drag participants to safety. The compulsion did not discriminate. Both men and women, the young and the old, rich and poor, were afflicted. Contemporary records suggest that city authorities were stunned. They had never encountered anything like it. A mass movement that was both voluntary in action but entirely involuntary in control, leaving medical professionals and local officials scrambling for a solution. City leaders, desperate to stop the epidemic, initially attempted medical interventions based on the knowledge of the era. Physicians recommended what they believed would cure the dancers: more dancing. The rationale was that exhaustion might purge the body of the compulsion. Consequently, authorities built stages, hired musicians, and encouraged dancing in public halls, hoping the controlled environment would help. Tragically, this decision worsened the situation, providing dancers with more space and opportunity to continue the movements, increasing the number of participants and resulting in more fatalities. Reports indicate that some people dance for up to 16 to 18 hours per day, sometimes for weeks. Deaths occurred due to heart attacks, strokes, severe dehydration, or sheer muscular exhaustion. Eyewitnesses described individuals collapsing mid-step, convulsing from exhaustion, or being carried off to hospitals that were overwhelmed by the sheer number of victims. Contemporary chroniclers referred to the phenomenon as St. Vitus dance, linking it to the medieval understanding of chorea, a neurological disorder characterized by involuntary movements. Medical understanding at the time was rudimentary. Physicians could not identify a pathogen, poison, or toxin. No one could explain how an entire city could be struck by such a phenomenon. Panic spread through Strasbourg as families and neighbors watched friends, relatives, and community members dance themselves to death. The event became a community-wide psychological crisis, blending fear, superstition, and incomprehensible physical compulsion. Modern historians and scientists have proposed several theories, none of which fully explain the phenomenon. The most widely accepted explanation is that the dancing was a form of mass psychogenic illness, MPI, also called mass hysteria. Strasbourg in 1518 had faced famine, disease, poverty, and religious tension, creating a community-wide environment of stress. In such conditions, extreme psychological responses can manifest physically, causing involuntary movements, fainting, or seizures. The dancing plague is often cited as an early historical example of MPI. Another theory involves ergot fungus, which grows on rye and other cereals. Ergot contains chemicals similar to LSD and can induce hallucinations, convulsions, and erratic behavior. While some argue that ergot poisoning caused the plague, skeptics note that ergotism usually produces painful spasms and gangrene, rather than coordinated group dancing, and the sheer number of participants makes it unlikely. In 16th century Europe, dancing was sometimes interpreted as a response to divine punishment or blessing. Saint Vitus's dance, and similar beliefs, associated involuntary movement with curses, possession, or divine intervention. It is possible that the social and cultural context of Strasbourg amplified the psychological contagion, transforming anxiety and superstition into a physical epidemic. Observing others dance uncontrollably may have triggered imitative behavior, particularly under stress. Individuals might unconsciously mimic movement, creating a chain reaction of involuntary dancing. Social dynamics, peer pressure, and heightened communal tension likely fueled the epidemic. By late September 1518, the dancing subsided. Historians estimate that dozens of people died, with hundreds more severely injured or traumatized. The event left a lasting imprint on Strasbourg, both psychologically and culturally. Chroniclers documented the phenomenon as an unexplainable mass tragedy, and it remains one of history's most cited examples of mass psychogenic illness. In modern times, the dancing plague has been the subject of psychology, sociology, and medical research, illustrating how stress, cultural beliefs, and social contagion can manifest as physical behavior. It is also a reminder of the human vulnerability to collective phenomena, especially under extreme environmental, social, or psychological pressure. The image of entire streets filled with dancing bodies, collapsing from exhaustion, continues to capture the imagination of historians, filmmakers, and writers seeking to understand the limits of the human mind. The dancing plague of 1518 is both tragic and awe-inspiring. Hundreds of ordinary people, farmers, merchants, mothers, fathers, were consumed by a compulsion they could not resist, in a city struggling with famine, disease, and societal stress. The horror lay not only in the deaths, but in the utter incomprehensibility. There was no cause, no pathogen, no provocation, just a single woman dancing, then hundreds following, and a community watching in helpless terror. It forces us to reflect on the power of the human mind, the influence of stress and culture, and the sometimes terrifying ways psychology can manifest physically. It is a reminder that human behavior, particularly in extreme conditions, can be as mysterious as it is dangerous.